Okay, so Michael, what's happening in ed tech right now? I feel like I've been out of this space for a while and was curious to know like what you think, what's new, what's a continuation of what's been emerging and become maybe more standard practice. What's happening in structural design? Like tell me what we need to know.
Right. Well, I'm seeing the conversation go almost completely to the AI conversation. And I'm interested in AI and I think it's a conversation that needs to be had by teachers and students and administrators and all that. But I feel like a lot of smaller, very important conversations to have around instructional design are getting sort of pushed to the side.
Hmm.
The energy is going all to have conversations and workshops and things around AI. And I think those other things are really worth talking about. For instance, I really think there's still a ton of work to do in blended learning. Like, I think to do it well, I mean, we're literally now at a place where blended learning done right can transcend time and place. We literally could have a class where the best things could happen in real time and everything else could be done asynchronously. And there's a myriad ways to do that. And I think we should just still be talking about the best ways to turn face-to-face things into asynchronous things and how to look at asynchronous things and maybe turn them into face-to-face things depending on what is best for that particular teacher, for that particular grade, class size, content. Like, it all becomes what are the best things to do face-to-face. And that would take a great needs assessment, like what we were talking about before, to really get at the heart of what teachers are good at, what they want to do in their classroom, and what they do well. I think there's still a big conversation to have in blended learning. So that's one that's sort of getting marginalized by the big AI conversation.
Hmm.
And I think another conversation that we should be talking more about in terms of different ways of teaching and learning and learning practices is space retrieval practice. I think that retrieval practice gets conflated with testing and it shuts down a lot of conversations, and it's really not that. I mean,
Michael, can you explain what spaced retrieval practice is? I don't think that's a term I've used before.
sure, you know, the best way to learn something is if a learner is presented with some material, and then instead of going like the normal 15-week semester, new unit every week, we're not going back. The best way to learn something is to go forward a little bit, and then with some time to go and try to retrieve back, get your brain to retrieve what you've learned previously in a new way and start to apply it to what you're learning. And it's the spacing is important, how much time between, and the retrieval is important, what you're asking people to retrieve. But your brain starts to change, its memory starts to change when you go into memory and retrieve something. You're actually changing your memory. And this is like a great way to learn. And this is how we should be structuring our sort of curricula. But there's a lot of forces that at play that make that difficult. We have to get through this much material. We have to get from here to here. There's not a lot of time to go back. So it's a whole mindset to change to get
Hmm.
people and teachers to think about moving back to move forward, back,
Hmm.
forward, retrieve, apply that, learn a little more, go back, retrieve. It's a lot more work, but it's a much better way to learn and remember things and change your own memory by going into your memory. I think that the problem is that it gets conflated with testing, and there's a lot of conversations around testing and how some people think we should abandon testing, and so there's all kind of politics around testing. But I think that the space retrieval practice camp is saying, yeah, but we're not talking about that. We're not. we're not talking about testing as a measurement of intelligence. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about testing as a way to learn the material. So those tests don't have to be graded. They don't have to be, at the end of a semester or large. They could be non-graded. They could be quizzes. The point is the testing, not the grade.
It's not measuring how well you can perform, but it's a tool to help you kind of recall and learn better.
Yes,
Like
yes.
I'd
And
say,
I think that's a conversation that needs to be had, that differentiating between the two and saying
Mhm.
testing is a very important part of learning. And it's done in all aspects of learning, including academia, but outside of academia. But in academia, sometimes it gets a little weird because of all the different conversations happening around the unfairness of testing, which are conversations to be had. But I think the retrieval practice people would be like, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about low stakes, maybe non-graded, small opportunities to retrieve material in order to understand it better. So I think that's a conversation that shouldn't be marginalized for
No,
just for the AI.
that sounds really critical. And yeah, a good application of automation is how to make those judgments of where to place content in a timeline.
Mhm.
Yeah, loops back to previous material.
Right. No, it's very important, and I'd love to be part of those conversations. As you know,
Definitely.
as an instructional designer, those two things I feel very excited and curious about, as continuing to try to implement those into the classroom.
Right.